All right. Hey, welcome, y'all, to our weekly podcast. My name is Naudia. Just call me Niles Miller. My pronouns are she, her. I was born in Tacoma, raised in Seattle, Washington. I'm a Black, Indigenous, Mexican woman, mother, educator, entrepreneur. Today, I'm showing up with my research hat on and part of the Harriet Tubman Foundation for Safe Passage team to talk to you about our Community Reinvestment Fund with my co-host today. Vanna, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Nadia. Hey, everybody. My name is Vanna Sing. I am a genocide survivor from the country of Cambodia. I was raised in Tacoma, Washington, on the east side. I have been here for about 42 years. And so Tacoma is my city, and that's the city I represent. My roots are from Southeast Asia, kingdoms of Cambodia, Thailand, and Laos. And I am here as a researcher to represent our unique Southeast Asian voices. And I am with Tacoma Healing Awareness Community. I'm the founder. We are fighting against the systemic oppression against Southeast Asian, sorry. And I'm here to focus on the social justice that needs to be changed in my community. And thank you for having me.
So happy to be in space with you and to have your voice present on behalf of your community in partnership with your community. Next, I want to introduce our special guest today, Kate Kelly with the Department of Commerce. Kate, will you introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Nadia. Thank you for having me here today. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to be able to talk about the work that we're doing, that our team is doing at Department of Commerce. I have my pronouns are she, her. I've lived in Washington State for about 15 years. I moved here from Idaho. I have worked for the Department of Commerce for about 3 years. I'm an attorney. I worked for the Attorney General's office before I came to Department of Commerce. And in Idaho, I was a state senator, so I was in politics. And firearms and gun violence have been an important issue for me throughout my career. And part of the reason I moved to Washington was to work for the Environmental Protection Agency, where I had an opportunity to work a lot in Alaska, particularly with tribes up there in the native villages, and really became starkly aware of equity issues within the tribal communities up there, as well as down here in the lower 48. And so have been really blessed to be able to continue my work in policy areas that allow me to help focus on some of the major policy issues of our day and hopefully make things a little bit better for our families and communities.
Thank you. And so, Department of Commerce, but the department that you're heading is the Office of Firearm Safety and Violence Prevention. That's correct. Yeah, and that's a fairly new. Is it called a branch, or is this a department under Department of Commerce?
It's an office under the Department of Commerce.
So tell us more, please.
Okay. In 2020, the legislature created the Office of Firearms Safety and Violence Prevention. It's an office created by statute. They gave us a certain amount of funding to stand up the office. The focus is firearm violence. And particularly, there's a grant program that was created in the statute to provide funding for community-based organizations who are engaged in violence prevention and intervention efforts. And the office was stood up in 2021, and that's when the director asked me to lead it and get it staffed up and start just basically doing the good work that the legislature had asked us to do. we, at the same time, we combined some other community safety work that the agency was already doing with that work. And so we also administer a number of other community safety grants within our team. And so that includes a major reentry grant program that the legislature created 2 years ago. And then also other criminal justice programs that we implement, including a very big federal program that we administer and distribute money throughout the state to address emerging criminal justice issues in particular. So we're the part of Department of Commerce that focuses on those issues. And there really is, for the most part, not direct services what we do, and what Commerce really does for the most part is to deliver funding to organizations who then provide direct services to people in the communities.
Perfect. That's so helpful. For our listeners who may not know how or why we happen to be here today, Kate mentioned some of the things that her department does. A big one for us being, violence prevention, gun safety, which falls underneath in the work that we're doing in the community safety bracket. So Vanna and I are here on behalf of this Community Reinvestment Fund. Part of our research, which is going to influence how $200 million goes into our communities across Washington state, it emphasizes the importance of storytelling. And so this is the other reason that we share about ourselves when we come into space together. And it's part of our research process where we are collecting, we're collecting stories about the good work that goes on within commerce, but also what we are doing out here as community to try and create a solution to the long-lasting, multifaceted ways that the war on drugs has impacted our community. So thanks for sharing. And for folks who may not be aware but are listening now, we've been tasked with this responsibility of figuring out the most strategic way to get $200 million into our communities here in Washington state. Those of us who have been most impacted by the again, I'll repeat myself because it's worth it, the multifaceted impacts that of the war on drugs. I think a lot of us have a knowing, and so what we're trying to do is help others understand too, just how it's just not cookie cutter. It's not black or white. There's many ways that folks are impacted by indirectly or directly by the harm that was caused by the war on drugs. So we know that your department covers, and actually I'm gonna pass it to Vanna to ask their question. Take it away.
Thank you. Wait, am I number 1 or number 2? Okay. Kate, thank you so much for your time today. Your department covers 3 out of the 4 investment areas that the Community Reinvestment Fund research is focusing on. How will you ensure that our unique Southeast Asian voices and struggles be included? And another one, and can you help make it easier for us to gain access to that 200 million? Because like I was sharing earlier, that for folks like me who are grassroots, we're starting from the bottom and we're doing the work, but we are not strong in the paperwork process area. And could you please share a little bit about your thoughts on that, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Vanna, and thank you for your advocacy in raising the voice of Southeast Asian community members in the conversation here, and I'm sure many other conversations that you're engaged in. So all very good questions. So the question, so the statute that set up the community reinvestment account and that directed the preparation of a plan on how to distribute the funds, identified 4 different program areas that the funds could be distributed to. And as you suggest, 3 of those 4 areas fall through our team at Commerce and the work that we administer. And so the 3 of those are firearm violence intervention and prevention, reentry grant programs, and in addition, legal services and the provision of legal services to folks in our communities. And so one of the things that Commerce does, and that Commerce does very well, is to administer grant programs. But what we know is that the way that we administer those grant programs and distribute funds throughout the state hasn't always been equitable and hasn't always recognized the different needs of different levels of organizations, different communities, and where they are specifically at. And we certainly haven't done as much as we can to reach out to folks who might not get their information from our traditional delivery mechanisms. And so we have been steadily focused on trying to improve our grant and funding processes to address just the very issues that you're raising. And I'll use the example of our reentry grant program. This program is only currently 2 years old. We're hoping that the legislature re-ups it this year. But we've explicitly structured that grant program in its second year so that there's different scaled funding of programs, so that smaller programs are treated differently than the more larger programs who might, as you suggest, have the paper infrastructure and the expertise to manage larger sums of money, but also just to provide broader services. At the same time that we're supporting those existing organizations, we also want to be supporting smaller organizations that are startups or that, have different ideas about how things should be done. And so we've structured that grant program so that there's different levels of technical assistance that we provide to those programs and different levels of funding that we provide to them. We've also been very intentional about trying to provide support, both during the application process as well as once the contracts are issued and folks start spending the money. There's more we can do, and we need help doing that. So we appreciate the efforts that you're doing to connect with community throughout this process, this community reinvestment process, and to bring those voices to the table, because we really need to hear from people about what they need and what the best way to reach them is. And it's not going to be the same in every community. And it's not going to be the same across the range of cultural demographics that we're trying to reach. So what works for the community you represent, Vanna, that may be very different from the communities that are represented elsewhere, either elsewhere in our state or elsewhere from a cultural standpoint. That was a long answer.
No, I love
Great.
it, Kate. Thank you so much.
Can I pull a little bit more out of you on that? Can you tell us like what the technical assistance looks like for the orgs on the smaller end? What are because it's actually, that's how I met Sean through the Black Brilliance research. But what I found after we had kind of like wrapped that research up with the defund money is that they started providing more technical assistance. I don't think everyone knows that amazing resource. So if you could tell us a little bit more about like the ways that y'all are have separated the big and the small orgs and like the difference in what that support looks like currently, that'd be great. And then maybe if maybe we can dig into it a little more, like what else you would like to see in place.
So if it's okay, I'm going to switch over to our firearm violence intervention programs that we've been administering. And in the case of those programs, we've structured them very deliberately so that we have an opportunity to provide assistance specifically to organizations that are accepting our funding. And we've engaged separately from the money that we're giving the organizations. We've engaged a technical assistance provider who is working with them to help troubleshoot issues, to help them connect with each other, to think about best practices, all those kind of things, but in a coaching kind of way, not in a gotcha kind of way. The intention of this is to help them be successful, not to catch them at anything. We also have the University of Washington working on it with us to help us work with us and the organizations to figure out what data collection looks like and what reporting looks like, so that we can all make sure the programs are successful in achieving whatever outcomes we are trying to achieve. And we're just barely at the beginning of starting that with both our reentry programs as well as our firearm violence programs. But we see a lot of promise in that. And I think next time around, particularly in the firearm violence area, we'll be thinking about organizational capacity, so that we will simply have funding available to develop organizational capacity rather than actually delivering the programs, but to help people get started. We know firearm violence is an issue across our state and really in every community in our state, but we do know that there's concentrated areas that need more help than others, not just whole communities, but very specific neighborhoods, and that kind of thing. But they're all in very different places about what they need in terms of help from us and support for leaders in those communities and neighborhoods. And so we're going to continue to work on that and continue to reach out to neighborhoods and figure out what they want. One of the things we've done in the firearm violence area is to provide planning grants. Right now we have 3 different communities that we're providing funding to do strategic planning in terms of long-term planning for their communities and where the needs are in terms of violence prevention. And just helping divert youth in particular from paths that might be not safe for them or for their families. But also just making sure that we're responding to the needs of that community and the desires of that community, and not just imposing some solution from our central vantage point.
I love that you brought up that, like, it's not a gotcha thing, because there's, in my experience, like, there's so much fear of government entities, and every, like, no matter what, whether it's the tax man, the police officers, whatever the case may be, that's like, we get these opportunities, or sometimes we don't go for opportunities because we're like, well, what if I don't do it right? And then I'm going to get in trouble. And it's so important for folks to hear that, like, no, we're actually, we want to help you every step of the way. And even if you do make a mistake, like, we're actually, like, we're going to help you work through it. And hopefully part of the mindset is that, like, if something does happen where y'all make a mistake, that it's more of an opportunity for the entities to be like, oh, maybe we should switch the way that we work. Maybe we should make this less of a challenge. I've seen a lot of, that the grant stuff is still new to me, only just the past couple of years. But what I've been so thankful for my community, with folks who are experienced with grants, is them, like, pushing back consistently and being like, no, you need to make this easier, because the conversation we're having is about capacity. And that's, like, my favorite word in the work that I do. And, like, a lot of our struggle, I say, like, 90% of the struggle is us just our community trying to get enough money to just take care of ourselves and our bills. Like, if we could just breathe a little bit, because we know that we're going to get paid not the livable wage that's, like, defined for us, because we know that that's not realistic, especially here in Washington state. Like, we got granted that, like, $20 an hour, like, 15 years ago or something like that. And, like, now we're double that. So not that what they're defining it as, but a real livable wage to do this work that is actually like, folks are trying to save humanity and on a local scale. And it creates a ripple effect. So I was happy to hear you say that, because I want community to know that that's the direction that I know I have been seeing these opportunities go, these funding opportunities go, is where these entities who normally were like, oh, we haven't, we do it this way and it's only this way, and you got to do all these things and tell us all this information that's really hard to put together. And if you didn't go to college for it, you're probably not going to be able to figure it out, or you're going to have to pay somebody else to do it. That they have been shifting their mindset, that we have a lot of allies and members of our community who are now stepping into positions of power and are like, this is actually the equitable way to do this. So I'm really happy to hear you say that, and I wanted to call it out again because I want our community to know that like these funding sources are accessible, and that folks are actually like doing things different to support you. So there's no reason to be scared. Like, go for it. And on the topic of of fear, I feel like it's a good kind of what happened when we're focusing on the war on drugs, but we could always go farther back, right? We could always go farther back about the harm, the trauma that has taken place in this country. But we'll focus on the war on drugs for now. And I was born in '89 to a 15-year-old mom who was on the hilltop and had gang relationships, ended up going to prison for selling like one crack rock that was given to her by an adult gang member. My mom is now the founder of the organization that is doing this consulting work. So that's I'm thankful that we're in this position to talk about our lived experiences. But I say all that to say that I was an infant and a toddler, and I got taken out of that situation and taken to North Seattle, where it was a totally different socioeconomic status. I was very comfortable, white neighborhood. But I think about when I would come back to the hilltop and how scared I was, never knowing like what's going on or what could happen. I still have this really young mom and stepdad, and it was scary. There were scary times. It was scary before I was born, and my mom will tell stories, my aunt will tell stories of how hard crack hit, of the violence of the firearms, and when now that it is out in public, how the war on drugs started, and it's conversation to start. I say that to say like fear has been used as a tool of oppression. To keep folks operating on low vibrations, and we were able to we have a 2-minute video from some of the research that we did that is saying that we need to create this robust intergenerational healing we need to create robust intergenerational healing focused career pipelines, and there's a lot of healing that needs to go on from the trauma and the fear that was caused by the war on drugs. And Vanna had a really great question. And shoot, maybe should I just ask it? Not that I'm like flowing into it, but Vanna wanted to know, where does spirituality and healing fall into this process? How much is commerce thinking about that part? As they're giving funding out, as they're looking for organizations and individuals to fund, how much are you thinking about that?
So I can't speak for all of commerce, but I can speak for the community safety work that we do. And I really appreciate this question, Vanna. And the trauma associated with the community safety work we do, it is very evident to us. And and the synergy between, and I'll just use the reentry program and the firearm violence program, the synergy we see between not only the people who are involved in both of these spaces, but also just the issues that are involved, the neighborhoods that are involved, just the significance of the safety issues as you describe, and to the people that are working in this space and that have been experiencing these traumas is just so important for us to acknowledge as we do this work. The reentry grant in particular, the last time we went out for a solicitation to give money to the tiered level of or levels of organization, we specifically said in there that the funding could be used for healing circles and other more spiritually oriented means to bring people together and to help them understand their feelings and process what they've been through. Similarly, in the firearm violence space, there's so much trauma, not just to the individuals involved, but to their families. And so incorporating that into the work that we do, to the extent it is welcomed by communities and to the organizations we're providing funding for, that is definitely part of the work we do. One of the things in firearm violence that we do is we have a grant right now with Harborview, which you probably know is the only trauma one hospital that we have in Washington. So they see a lot of gunshot victims there, and they treat them in the emergency room and get them stable and then send them back out into their communities most often. And that could be a community anywhere across the state, but we're providing funding to them to help them transition these folks as they go back into their communities, so that we recognize that it's not just a matter of stitching up the wound they came in with, but there's much more work that has to occur as they go back into their communities and try and adjust to the trauma that they've experienced being a victim of firearm violence. And so that connection is attempting to be made. There's so much more we can do, but the great thing is that people, both on the true healthcare side of things, the public health care side of things, and even the criminal justice side of things, people are recognizing that this spiritual and the emotional remedies and things that we need to be doing are, it's not just a matter of stitching up the wound or taking a gun away or sending somebody back out from incarceration with a gift card. There's much more that needs to occur. That was a super long answer.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it's a major shift in culture, I would say, that's happening right now, where folks, and I think the pandemic kind of kicked it off, where folks are like, okay, we need to prioritize our mental health in a real way. But you mentioned synergy, and it's, in my experience anyways, I've just seen a lot of alignment happening, especially in communities of color, where it's humbling, and it gives me hope, because I see us collaborating and bringing our organizations together, going for some of these bigger funding opportunities where it's we're stronger together,
Yes.
if it's 5 or 6 grassroots organizations that focus on that same thing, and we're saying this is what we need, this is what we're doing, this is what we need. I've found that that's very, very powerful. So I'm happy to hear that it's coming to the forefront of folks' conversation, and then from the mental health, that folks are really opening up to the spiritual aspect of it. I know I think about it with my cultural background, just the way that we were stripped of our spirituality, the significant and lasting impact that has had on us as people, and I think about other cultures that are still able to hold on to, they haven't completely been disconnected from their ancient cultural practices, their ancestral cultural practices, and how badly I wish that, especially for my Black community, because we need it so bad when we're up against imagery that perpetuates harm, and it's powerful imagery that perpetuates harm, and also makes us, feel it's violent. It makes us feel like we're the bad guys all the time. So yeah, I'm happy to hear that, and I'm looking through the notes. But Vanna, also open up to you if you have any comments, thoughts.
Can I add one thing which is to the point that you just made about organizations kind of supporting each other? I think one of the difficulties that has been inherent in our grant systems and our system of distributing funding historically is that it almost pits organizations against each other because they're competing for funding. And this is back to your point, Vanna, that some organizations are, more sophisticated, some aren't. And that historically, I think the more sophisticated organizations that have a grant writer on staff and, have an accounting system and all that have been able to rise to the top of grant applications just simply because they had more resources. And that isn't always the best way for us to meet communities' needs, or certainly isn't the best way to build organizational capacity outside of the major organizations. So we are being very conscious about making sure that we're encouraging folks to connect with each other, mentor each other, share best practices. And we just did this the other day. We have 14 different reentry programs that we're funding right now across the state. And it was week before last, we had a meeting of all of the organizations. They each sent people, and they had 7 minutes to present what their organization is doing with the funding that we've given them. And they shared it with each other. And it was such a moving experience. I mean, it was very inspirational to hear about all this really good work that's going on across the state. But it was also time after time during this conversation, we heard the organization say, oh, that's such a good, I really want to connect with you after this conversation and find out, how I can do that, or I've got people I can refer to your program, or, just all of these connections. And it wasn't in a competitive way. It was in a very supportive kind of way. And I think more of that needs to happen.
Thank you, Kate.
Yes.
I was just gonna touch a little bit about the Southeast Asian struggle, if that's okay. One thing that I learned throughout the 7 years of community organizing is that the systemic racism and oppression started with the targeting the Black community, especially the war on drugs. And one of the things that is not often spoken or given gratitude to is the survival skills that the Black people have created for themselves and taught other communities, because if it wasn't for them learning how to survive, I feel like we would not have also not survived. Meaning, when I'm out there talking about my struggles, because I was a teen mom, lived the gang life, and I shared a lot of the oppression strategies that the government did to my people. And then there's the elder Black women in the community, they're saying, oh, that started with our community. And then, one of the things they was doing, like in the 80s, was raiding homes for mothers who was on TANF, because they'd have to lie and say they were single moms so they can get some kind of income. And that was taught to me in my community, like, oh, okay, I'm a teen mom. You got to say that, oh, you got to lie to get some money. That's the only way to survive. Or you got to sell drugs. And, marijuana was drugs. And that was what we was doing in my younger years and stuff. And so, I was honored that King 5 did a story on me about my issue with the war on drugs. And so I wanted to just share that for Southeast Asians, if they go into prison and they're sentenced 365 days or more and they're not a citizen, their status gets revoked. So you have no status, like undocumented. we were refugees. We were welcomed to the United States with a visa. No, not a visa. I apologize. With the permanent resident card, the green cards. And so you come to United States and your parents aren't smart enough to help you get citizenship or the family citizenship, then you're asked out. And so you go to prison because you lived the gang life, because racism impacted you and you have to stand up for yourself. You go to prison and you lose your status. You serve your 15, 20, 30 years and you come out and you have no status. And ICE is picking you up at the prison door and taking you to the detention center. And for some people, they're not lucky enough to make it home to their family. They get a one-way ticket to the country, the motherland. And some people who are here, they're living in limbo because they have a final deportation order. And some people, they have money, so they're able to reopen their case. And what it takes to reopen your case is at least 10 G's. You need like at least 5 G's for the criminal attorney and 5 G's for the immigration attorney. And so like out of 200 people, only 15 people are going to take that step because they have the financial means. And some people, they just live how they can. So usually it means you got to go back in the streets and do what you got to do. So oppression from my people, we've been still struggling, we've still been suffering. And I really appreciate that there's opportunity to have legal resources for the community. And my people are so oppressed that you cannot find a lot of people in the community speaking up about our struggles, because we still fear the government. We still fear the police, because the police still follow you and they racial profile you. And so, it trickles down to the family, and, we don't know no better. So we just stay in that lifestyle. But I'm definitely going to keep speaking my truth, keep healing, because the more you heal, the more you're able to speak up and stand up for yourself and for your people. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you. I know that that's from Indigenous communities, something that I've learned is like those of us that are able to tell our story and those of us that are able to feel the emotions and say it out loud and share, like we're the ones who are going to push this thing forward, because it's really and that's why the storytelling piece is so important in this research methodology, is because we need folks to have empathy, and you can't really gain that without having an interaction with somebody where it's like, where are you from? Where are you from? What are you about? Tell me about it. Like, I want to know your struggles if you're willing to share, because I might be willing to share mine, and in my experience too, like that ability to testify, it causes a ripple effect for your community. All of a sudden they feel like, damn, I know somebody who you went through the same thing I went through. I don't have to feel ashamed anymore. I don't have to feel guilty. And you said another thing, you were, saying that, if folks aren't smart enough to know how to maneuver within the system after they get caught up, they're asked out. And who I really want to hold accountable is the entities that get us in trouble, first of all, but also like it's these entities' responsibilities, it's the system's responsibilities to make these resources well known and accessible, to be telling us early on, like, if anything were to happen to you, like if you were ever to make a mistake as a young person, here's what you do. Like it's interesting. We talk about this, school to prison pipeline, and and I guess that's what we're here to spend some time talking about that also. But we know how well that works. We also know that, like here, especially in Washington State, like our education system is way behind in the times. And that's, countrywide also, but we like to focus hyper local. But what this project is also strategizing around is like, how do we get the young people access to resources, not only in these violence prevention, firearm safety, that type of conversation, but across the board. So like career pathways into healing, or other careers that we know that there's a need for in our community, but we're not going that direction and making it accessible. So, because right now, like, for a lot of folks, college seems like it's not a reality, and they're not aware that there are all these programs for young people that will expedite the process for you so fast, you know? And so I just, I say that to say, and I guess it's kind of, we're more conversating now, and I don't want to throw too many curveball questions at you, Kate, but I feel like the marketing piece of this, like making sure that resources are accessible and that it's like going out everywhere, you know, like are y'all thinking about it all? And here's the other thing that you mentioned too, is that a lot, I know that you mentioned in previous conversations, like that a lot of this is political. Like it's hard to get everyone on board with like healing circles, or you know, like doing things that are different out of the box, or like putting some, you know, extra protective measures around firearms. That a lot of it's political, so I know it's challenging. And what I'm wondering is, what kind of ideas are y'all playing with, if any, around like getting the word out about what you're doing, making it accessible, and is that something that like y'all are looking for from this research to kind of guide?
The more information we can get about how to do that, the better. And meeting people where they are, and making sure we get on their, we get their attention wherever that comes from. And I've been thinking about this lately. Like when for example, when an agency adopts a rule, there's like the law says you have to like publish it in a paper, and you have to, you know, post it at a library, and it, you know, meeting the legal requirements is one thing, but actually trying to use current technology and current means of communications to reach people who might be interested in something is a totally different matter. And I do think more focus needs to be on that. But also, again, it's going to vary depending on the community you're trying to reach, depending on the culturally, what is the best way to communicate with that particular population. But it also is going to require a lot of partnerships. And that's one of the things we've been able to develop in the couple of years that I've been doing this, is to start building relationships with those organizations all over the state, wherever they are, and ask them to help us amplify our work and our opportunities, and you know, at the same time communicate back to us promising leaders that are coming up in different communities, and promising practices, and what's working and what's not working, and all those kind of things. So how we do that on a statewide basis is, you know, it's particularly challenging. I mean, it's one thing to do it in a community. That's hard enough just in a city like Tacoma or Yakima, but to do it statewide, you really have to be nimble and to be ready to customize your communication and your programming really for particular needs that come up. And as you suggest, political environments, and just, you know, openness to different practices, particularly in the criminal justice space, and you know, when you're talking about firearms or re-entering populations and all those kind of things, public perceptions can vary so much across the state.
Absolutely. And I wanted to make sure that I plug too, because you know, for me, I'm the person who submitted our proposal for this contract with Department of Commerce, and you know, curated the team of melanated superheroes that are running this project. And Sean was like Sean Glaze was the first person that we had thought about, because I got to participate in that Black Brilliance research, and it's brilliant. You know, I love that they say it's straight up in the name, because this knowing what we're up against with media, you know, and like we have to be tapped in with media. There has to be things that people can watch and scroll towards, and you know, things of that nature. And it has to be transparent. You have to be willing to demystify the conversation. Like, if I don't know what that acronym stands for, I'm gonna need you to define it. You know, like what are we actually talking about? And people have to be, you know, and these type of conversations I feel like are so powerful. It's why I believe in that Black Brilliance research, and why we were like, this needs to be like, we should be the group and this should be the method. And I'm really excited about that, because on Fridays, we have office hours or lunch hour sessions online at 12 o'clock every Friday throughout the duration of this research. And what we're finding there too, similar to what you were saying about, you know, synergy and where you're seeing when your grantees got together and we're like, oh, well, I'm about to plug in with this, plug in with that. It's that space for us as researchers, and then as community that's curious and interested, and stakeholders like yourself too. Like, we want everyone in commerce to come, you know, that's where we're trying to make these connections and get rid of these kind of like gates and walls where it's like we feel like folks are, you know, it's almost like that celebrity kind of veil where it's like, no, like we're all community here, we're all stakeholders here. That's what those Friday lunch office hours are for community to come together. And we're seeing that same thing happen there every week, where you know, new folks are coming in, they're asking their questions. They're learning about a new organization that they want to support. They're sharing resources. And that's really what all of this is about. The amount of relationships that I was able to generate in the Black Brilliance research, like it was an overwhelming feeling of just like gratitude. I'm like, wow, I just met a person who does that thing that I was looking for. And then I can support them also. And that's, again, that alignment that I've seen over, you know, the past 10 years, but since pandemic, especially, where community is just like, all the cogs are kind of fitting into place, you know, and then there's like great pieces stacking on top of each other and fitting into place with others. That really excites me. So I wanted to make sure and plug that for everybody. You can register for those online sessions on our website, www.wa-reinvest.com. We touched on capacity a little. Like, we've touched on capacity a lot. And I'm wondering if we want to go into that anymore. Or Vanna, are you think, I just want to make sure I'm always making space for you to lead us to, if your mind is going any certain direction, or Kate, if your mind is going a certain way, things that you feel like you want to make sure that we highlight.
Well, there's one area that we haven't really talked about, but Vanna definitely touched on it, which was legal services and legal assistance. And so I think it's important to talk about that. And Vanna very movingly described a situation where folks can be getting out of incarceration and then just kind of fall off this cliff, either an immigration cliff, or it can be a housing cliff, or a technology cliff, because they, you know, haven't been part of their community for so many years. But frequently we have people who have these legal financial obligations, or they have a record that comes with them, a conviction record, that we have mechanisms in place to remove those barriers from people who are reentering, or from people who have been justice involved. But unfortunately, what we know is that frequently the paperwork and the processes to get that done can be very complicated and can require legal assistance. And so one thing that we're seeing very much, and we have a couple reentry grants that we're giving to provide legal services to folks, but it's barely touching the surface of the need out there. And we know that if we can make legal services more accessible to people as they try and transition into a more successful life, if we can take the burden of legal financial obligations off of them, and if we can help clear up their conviction record, to take off charges that maybe shouldn't be on there at this time and place, that can make all the difference to somebody successfully transitioning back into the community. And so really important that we continue to keep that top of mind. And it kind of goes to the fact that just suturing up the wound is not what we need to help people be successful and to help address years and years of intergenerational trauma that folks have experienced. We need to be thinking about how to put them on the best path that we possibly can. That might include healing circles, that might include legal services, that might include help finding a career path that is within their reach and that is going to help them be successful and successfully support themselves. But just to make that accessible and to recognize that there's a need for that.
Thank you, Kate. So do you think, well, I've been networking with our partnering agencies like Northwest Immigration Rights Project.
Yeah.
And so they agree that there's work to do, but there's not enough funding. And so I was talking to Tim Warden Hertz, who is the directing attorney for NERP in Tacoma. He's saying that if their organization can get funding for the immigration piece, they'll be gladly to take on clients that is not in the detention center. But they do take some exceptional cases that are referred from agencies that they collaborate with, such as ours. But they're just wondering, like, how can they get some of that 200 million so they can serve the people? Because they know that there's work to do. And I know that the Seattle Clemency Project is taking on some cases as well. But, you know, Tacoma, we have a dire need. And there's needs that are not, there's legal needs that's not being met because there's no money. And I've only heard of one immigration pro bono case. But, you know, I just feel like NERP should be one of the agencies that deserves some of that money. Do you have any suggestions what I can report back to Tim with?
Let me think. Legal services is identified specifically as one of the project areas for the distribution of community reinvestment account funding. And so there's much legal need across the state, including, as you suggest, legal need in the immigration space. And I believe there are a number of different legal service providers who stand ready across the state to provide those services if we can help them staff up and provide the funding to them. So Northwest Immigration Project would be one. Northwest Justice Project is great. There's many other legal services providers and legal aid providers across the state who could provide services. So I do think this is a potential opportunity for them, that the results of the work that you're doing and the research that you're doing will tell, you know, what the need is and what the recommendations are for that distribution. And I don't know what you're hearing in your community outreach in terms of need out there, but we know that the legal financial obligations and the records disposition and dealing with folks' criminal records and helping them work through that is one of the important areas that we have need for legal services in as well.
It may be helpful too. So I'm looking at our Commerce Project recommendations sheet. I don't know if that got shared with advisors yet, Vanna, but it's the extensive list of everything that we so far have gathered from the research from community. And then we're just whittling down, or rather like wording strategically so it's all inclusive. But definitely under civil and legal assistance is there's a couple of things for immigration or community. Yeah, I'm reading it. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, there we go. Legal representation for individuals facing immigration issues, but also it's like provide legal assistance for sealing or expunging criminal records, create a statewide system for waiving or reducing legal financial obligation, targeted LFO relief for communities with low intergenerational wealth. So, you know, the research is proving exactly what NERP is talking about, you know, your networks are talking about. And the concept that we've been playing with during the retreat, something that we've been discussing is because you know, and I'm learning as we go too with this. This is a new game for me too, but there's like a couple different ways that we're going to make our recommendations. One is like how much money to which areas, and then more specifically, like here's who we're saying that like y'all should focus on, and here's how you should get it to them. And so one of the ideas of like how to get it to them is this performance-based reviews model. Like taking that, and this none of this is for sure, but these are ideas that we're playing with, strategizing around rather, not playing with, but a performance-based review model where orgs will get an upfront amount to have the capacity to begin the work, but then also, you know, once they're able to start the work, it's like, all right, how much impact did you make, like numbers wise? So if we're, you know, if we're saying on civil and legal assistance, like out of that 200, not that 200 folks who got, you know, picked up, how many, you know, have we improved from the 15? Is it better than 15? Is it better than before? And the other thing that I was throwing out on that same conversation with Synergy is like, well, what it, you know, let's make it easy as possible, but also let's encourage these community organizations that are doing that same type of work to go in on this together. So it's not just NERP that's awarded for this, but they collectively align with all these other orgs and say that we're going to do this together. We're going to get all the funding, we'll split it equally or do it case by case, whatever the case, you know, we'll allow them to figure it out, but giving them the capacity dollars to be able to align with the rest of the orgs that are doing it. And then we would also, I would think we would see, okay, your group is missing this part of the team, but we got that over here.
Right.
So like, how can we cross and take care of each other? And then, you know what I'm saying? That kind of way. So that's something we've been playing with. And not playing with, I'm not gonna say we're playing with it. That's something we've been strategizing on. That really got me excited. And I feel like a large part of like this research is having these exciting conversations to like spark some hope in people, because it's trying ass times, you know. And I know for me for sure, like this opportunity, knowing what my mission, my vision, my purpose is in life, it gives me hope. I'm like, okay, this is actually happening. Like, and it's not just one part of community, but like community is saying, and the research is, because of this brilliant structure of this research method, it's, you know, justified by how the powers that be like to see it. Well, it's got to be data, it's got to be academic, it's got to be numbers, da, 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 da. It's being proven again, time again. Numbers, all their data already says it, but now we're saying, okay, we're going to tell you one more time, just like this, in a recording of a Zoom of a conversation that we're having with members in community who are invested in this, have dedicated their lives to this, to creating change. We're telling you now through our stories to ring your empathy bell, that like, yeah, now you got to move on it, and not just 200 million, because that's a drop in the bucket for an entire Washington state. It's just a drop, you know. We need more relief. We need continued relief. And it's, you know, even though I know that a part of this reinvestment fund is saying like, oh, it's not going to need no continued relief, I am one of the people on the team who is going to continue to bring up in conversation that, yeah, we acknowledge that you say that, but the reality is all of this needs continued support. It all needs continued relief. And we should work collectively to make sure that that happens. But yeah, hopefully that, you know, little chunk is helpful and spark some hope in folks, because these are the recommendations that we're making. It's what community is asking for, and it's what we are going to be pushing through.
My son gets home at 3 o'clock, if that's okay.
Oh yeah. I feel like we got a lot of really good stuff, y'all.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Sean, for this opportunity.
Mhm. Okay, so let me let's do kind of like, I'll do one last question, which is just gonna be like, what's your biggest dream? What's your biggest dream for this 200 million? How do you hope how do you hope it'll get to community, or what effect do you think it will have, or do you hope that it will have on community? As our closing question, and then I'll like do an outro for us.
Okay.
So let me take that from the top. Okay, so for our final question, Kate, I'll open to you, Vanna too, if you're ready or if you're willing. What is your biggest hope, dreams, aspiration for what this 200 million will do for community? I know for me, I want this to just be like the light to the fire, or I want it to be the blueprint. I really see this methodology being a blueprint for the rest of our country. And I'm really, I believe like wholeheartedly that this is the change that we needed to see and how community and government work together. And so I hope that this is just the beginning of, I hope it's just the beginning.
Well, I can say that one word comes to mind, and it's just epic. It's an epic moment. This never happened before. And I'm just so honored to be a part of it. And thank you, everybody.
And I think am grateful that this need was recognized and that this deep dive is going into this particular issue at this particular moment in time. And this is a drop in the bucket in terms of improving our communities and addressing some long-term systemic issues, and long-term intergenerational trauma that's happened. But what a wonderful opportunity we have here to plant some seeds, start making things better, help some families and neighborhoods. So really looking forward to being part of this process. And thank you both for your work on this.
Thank you for being here today. Y'all, thank you for watching our podcast on the Community Reinvestment Fund. Again, check us out on www.wa-reinvest.com. Sign up for our Friday office hours. They're on Zoom, 12 o'clock. We've got also some really cool events coming up. One tomorrow, if this makes it out on time, January 20th, we've got the Say It Loud Artist Showcase. You can stream it, or you can go to a couple different locations, either in Seattle or Tacoma. So go to the website, get registered, kick it with us on Fridays, share this project far and wide with everyone. Talk about this. We have a 2-minute video on YouTube that does a great overview of what this project is. We've got video ask and tells on our website as well. You can even do written. We try to meet you everywhere where you are at. We're trying to make this as accessible as possible. If you're interested in getting more involved in this work over the next couple of months, because we only have until the summertime to get our proposal, or not our proposal, but our recommendations in. Do the video ask or the audio ask or the written ask. Answer those questions. Let us know that you're more interested, and then we will reach back out to see if we can plug you into this work more. It's been a pleasure. Thank you again for hanging in here with me. And peace.